flowers that I really like are the ones that you have to plant the bulbs in the spring and dig them in the fall. If they don't take a lot of work, they're not nice flowers. I don't know why that is. Shortly after we moved back here, Carol was worship chairman. And so she needed flowers for the altar, and so I started fixing. And it's just kind of evolved since then. I just keep doing it. People like it. I like doing it. Saturday evenings, highlight is fixing an arrangement of flowers for Sunday. Grandpa's oldest sister, Aunt Roxy, married into the Wheelers. So there they came. Were Rustons. My grandmother McCutcheon was a Ruston. Other members of, well, Grandma McCutcheon's brother and her two cousins were all raised by the same man, because brothers married sisters and one man died, so the other man raised both families and took care of both farms. And so Molly McCutcheon, which is Uncle Harrison's wife, was a cousin of hers, and Richard Riggs's, Uncle Dick Riggs's wife, Aunt Nettie, was a sister to her. She was a Ruston. When you go in the cemetery, you know, there's a curve to the right, to the left as you go up the hill. That was not always part of the cemetery, because all there was a path that went straight up to the old church, the log church, the original church. And they wanted to make this curve around and drive around. And so Grandpa gave them $900 to buy that ground. And he got for that 18 lots. And I'm using the 18th one. He was my mother's youngest brother. Lived at Santa Claus on the lake. And his birthday was on July the 4th. So we always had July the 4th at Uncle Arad's for his birthday. He had farm chores to do as a kid too, so every time they would butcher pigs for meat, then they would save the bladder. And he blew that up, and that was his first basketball. That's how he learned to play basketball, with a pig's bladder. He always wanted to stay in the teaching field, even while he was coaching. He was still a teacher.
I think the legacy that Coach McCutcheon built and left here at the University of Evansville is spectacular, and it's something that resonates with current recruits. It's something we talk about with their families and their coaches, really from the moment of introduction. Obviously, you know, we have banners in the gym that we like to point out, and we talk about the championships that he won, the 5 national championships from 1959 to 1971, and it's really something that we're trying to strive to achieve here as well, is to, you know, have the level of success that he had at U of E, and also how he was recognized nationally. You know, he was the first small college coach inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame. At one point, it was Coach Wooden and Coach McCutcheon that had won 3 or more national titles in college basketball. And, you know, if you ask a lot of people that saw both teams play in those eras, they would say that, you know, the U of E would rival UCLA on the court. And Coach Wooden said as much, you know, during his time. So we feel very privileged that he coached here and taught here at our university, and we really enjoy sharing our story, his story, with our recruits. not only was he a teacher coach, but he actually taught. He was a math professor here, and loved his teaching. But I think for me as a coach only, in today's era, you don't really have many teacher coaches, is that teaching component. That's what we're doing, is we're teaching the game of basketball. I think the best coaches are exceptional teachers. And I think his success that he had with that framework speaks for itself. And that's something that whenever I'm, done coaching, I hope that, our players, among other things, would think, he was a good teacher and was able to teach and instruct in a way that, was respectful but also like knew the material and could answer questions and could handle, pressure situations whenever they arise.
I am so blessed to have grown up in church, been blessed by family, been blessed by a church to have that experience. And the scripture that is my call is Luke 12:48, to whom much is given, much is required. Because I've been given so much blessing and experience at Bluegrass and growing up with a family that's a Christian family and loves Jesus, and the church that loves Jesus, I am required and blessed to serve a lot. When I was 13 years old, she said, I want you to help teach. So I did become a teacher later on too, and a preacher. So the things that she did were just amazing, as well as working with the women's group, singing, sharing with the food and doing the apple butter. I talked to my sisters too, and they said, oh yeah, she helped cut those apples and all those things, because apple butter was a big thing here at Bluegrass. But she also cared for every person. When the extreme poverty was going on way back in time, she made sure that she cared for people, but not just giving them the food or giving them money, but asking them to work on the farm some, doing something. And then as they worked, then she provided for them and made sure that they were cared for. So really caring for every person was an amazing example that she had of caring for the poor, caring for people, as an example that, Grandma Catherine shared in powerful ways. So I know she was a blessing in many ways to our family, but I think also to Bluegrass. Yeah, the passion, the example, again, when people really show you what the church is supposed to be like, and then we can continue as the pastor to help other churches of how to care for every single person. It's a passionate way, and you see the blessings, you see the encouragement that you can give. Again, not every time does every person who is poor or in need give a great thank you, but most times they do, and they get to see the love and grace of Jesus the Christ. So those examples that I got to see at Bluegrass and then get to do now are just amazing of God at work. So it helps me to have that passion to truly reach out and continue to want. And I'm excited to know and see in the past, several years how much Bluegrass has grown. It was kind of funny. We thought when we left and they started growing, but the many blessings to see that it continues to grow in so many ways. And my mom still watches worship, and so glad that she's connected with that, and glad there's more people coming to Bluegrass. So I was blessed to know that.
Bluegrass has been a church in the Methodist tradition from its start in 1824. John Wesley was the leading founder of the Methodist tradition, which includes many denominations and churches involving millions of people around the world. In the 1700s, as an ordained clergyman in England, Wesley experienced a personal spiritual renewal that caused him to preach revival and social reform throughout England. It became such a powerful spiritual movement, it not only transformed England, but the movement spread to the States, where it became its own church in 1784. bluegrass is here because of Wesley's passionate faith and gifted organizational skills, which opened up the way for many to follow in his footsteps. Bluegrass member Joan Wheeler Mensel is directly connected to two of the founding families of bluegrass. One of those founding families, John and Elizabeth Hilliard, has a direct connection to John Wesley. So the roots of our church going back to England, and one of your direct descendants. So would you tell us a little bit about that connection and to you, but also the connection to Wesley?
Elizabeth Hilliard is my 4 times great-grandmother. They had invited Wesley into their home and church, and he said she, as a small child, had put on her bonnet for church, like we all, get dressed up, especially for Easter. And she had put a bow on, and Wesley made the comment, "Is that a bow upon Betty?" And so it was too frivolous for John Wesley. And so that's one of the stories that deep roots and connection to John Wesley with the Hilliard family.
Your family by which you get your name,
Yes.
Wheeler, Mark Wheeler, and his family, also coming from England. Tell us about that journey, because it's kind of hard to imagine how difficult that journey was.
We are fortunate enough that we have a transcribed copy of his diary when they came over in 1822. He and his wife, Elizabeth Roberts Wheeler, and they had 5 kids, aging starting at 16 down to a 1-year-old. And he commented about seeing the icebergs and how the ship pitched and rolled, but they constantly had prayer. There was singing. They even they went like 200 miles in 24 hours, but they always had, was grateful. They had very strong faith, stronger than mine, I feel like sometimes, to take that chance and to come to a new world for their religious freedoms. Mark Wheeler's story is bluegrass's story. If they would have, hit an iceberg, if they would have, the ship rolled over, such faith and that we're all here. And so I feel like this is bluegrass's story. It's not just mine.
So Reverend Joseph Wheeler was a brother to Mark Wheeler, and he too came from England, and he was ordained clergy in England, but ended up here. Can you tell us more about him and his family and what brought him here?
He was converted at 15, and then at 18 he became a minister. He did mission work on the streets in London. His wife's family are the Earleys. It was Sir John and Lady Elizabeth Earley, and their daughter Elizabeth was as a small child, sat on John Wesley's lap and recited the Psalms. They came over from England to escape religious persecution from the Church of England in 1819, and he traveled. He was actually Oxford educated. On the boat, he had his whole library, and it became damaged and dampened by the sea and sea salt. But he started his, preaching here and lighting the fire for Methodism in this part of the country. But they also left a nice stone home in, the luxuries at the time in 1819 of a big city, London, and moved to a log cabin home. And she gave up everything and talked about the wildlife of Indiana, panthers, wolves, bears, I'm sure, and just how scary it was at night, all the howling. But you can imagine leaving that life and all those worldly possessions. Her parents owned a blanket factory, so they were very well to do. And to move here and leave that all behind because of your religious beliefs.
So even after Wesley, I mean, Wesley endured some persecution, some trouble preaching out on the street, his message, the method by which he did so. And evidently those who followed after him continued. I understand Reverend Wheeler continued to preach in the streets in London as well, just as Wesley had done. And so it wasn't a popular message. It wasn't the popular way. And so obviously they felt like they had to get away in order to be free in the expression of their faith and that personal faith that they had. And I think it's rather remarkable that, what led them here, religious persecution, that's kind of the roots of bluegrass, roots of Methodism in this area. And earlier this year, we decided, without really knowing this at the time, that we would, for our 200th anniversary, we would sponsor water wells in Nigeria, which is recorded to be the most persecuted country for Christians in the world currently. And so our mission project ties to our history.
Mm-hmm.
And so that original fire and flame that burned so brightly in Wesley and then among the Wheelers and the Hilliards is continuing to burn and spread around the world today.
Yes.
Serving. Is there a person that I read today that maybe is your closest connection? So let's just take a quick journey through some of these names. Howard Barton was the first teacher of the Come Join Us Sunday School class. And by the way, that class is still going strong today after decades upon decades of being in existence. Mabel Riggs Barton played the pump organ at age 14. Margaret Elliott Chanley helped the children learn to skate in the community house and painted and designed several backdrops for children's programs. Emily Clutter hosted church-wide picnics on Clutter's Hill and was known for her angel food cakes at church dinners. I'm sorry, I missed out on those, aren't you? Emil DeWeese installed hardwood flooring for skating in the community house. Robert Eggers was a junior and senior high Sunday school teacher and was recognized as Lay Leader of the Week by the Evansville Sunday Courier and Press. Helen Englehart enjoyed going on mission trips, mission projects at Johns Island, South Carolina, and Toledo, Ohio. Herb Englehart had the reputation of making a good cup of coffee at church meals. He was also chairman of roller skating and helped call square dances. Arthur McCutcheon played and coached for Bluegrass basketball teams. If you don't know, we have a history of basketball here at Bluegrass going back to the 1920s. And he was also on the Bluegrass bowling team. I didn't know we had a bowling team. Wow, we did it all, right? But he served as superintendent of the Sunday school for 10 years. His father served for 20 years. His grandfather, Arad McCutcheon, not the coach, but the grandfather of the coach, served for 60 years as the superintendent of Sunday school. Dorothy McCutcheon was president of the Nina Circle and baked 2 to 3 pies a week for auctions to help pay off our chapel campus building when it was built in the 60s. Owen McCutcheon played on the state champion Bluegrass basketball team in 1928 and 29. Alda McCutcheon wrote a historical pageant of Bluegrass Church. Ruby Newmaster played on the girls' basketball team. So we have pictures of girls playing basketball in the 1920s as well. She was also organist on the pump and electric organs and was youth choir director. James Riggs played on the first Bluegrass boys' basketball team. Reverend William Riggs married his brother, Oscar and Harriet Riggs, and baptized Dale and Lee Riggs. Harriet Ann Riggs was a Sunday school teacher at age 14. Mildred McCutcheon Thompson was a prominent Sunday school teacher and played on the girls' basketball team when her father coached. So that's source number one. The second source that I'm using today comes from you. Over the past several weeks and months, we've asked the congregation to submit answers to 3 questions, the first of which was, who is 1 or 2 persons that have influenced your faith here at Bluegrass? And we've had several responses, and in fact, many of you sitting here today are included in those responses. So many persons in our congregation were named. But I'm only going to mention those who were named that have passed on, okay? Helen Korb, who encouraged many of the younger people of the church. Isn't that just a great way to be remembered, an encourager? Margaret Rose Chanley was a tireless worker for all the meals, funeral dinners, election meals, and church suppers. Harry Thompson for his leadership in Methodist Youth Fellowship and as adult choir leader for 33 years. George Polson for his mentorship while on the trustees board. Ross and May Riggs, who provided the example and opportunity to experience the development of faith in Jesus Christ. And then several of our folks mentioned Catherine Riggs, who was the choir director of children. They practiced a couple times a week, and she always made them feel that no one was better at singing than them. Mrs. Nell Bethel was president of the Indiana State Teachers Association and a Sunday school teacher here at Bluegrass. Edith Wallace was another well-respected Sunday school teacher. Someone wrote, everyone at the church throughout the years has played a part in my faith. So you're all included, dear friends. And someone else said, all the teachers were a part of my learning and my faith journey. In later years, Pastor Ruth Milgate was a friend and spiritual mentor to me and many others. Carl and Roxana Koenig's lifestyle, dedication to service on behalf of the church, involvement in the community was a living testimony to their commitment to the Lord and His church. Mabel and Earl Kiefer chose to continue that same pattern of living during their marriage. Ethel Kiefer rededicated her life to Christ and provided me with the opportunity to attend church and Sunday school, to sing in the choir, to learn the satisfaction of being a volunteer, to participate in youth activities, and most importantly, the opportunity to be influenced by faith-filled people. Several of you mentioned your parents as being influential here at the church in your faith and growth as a follower of Jesus Christ. Shelby Small was named as a wonderful Christian woman. Richard Riggs as a man of faith. Margaret Chanley made figures out of clay for us to visualize the characters of the Bible in Sunday school. Reverend Sharp was a kind, intelligent person. And then someone wrote about these 3 that maybe have already been named, but I just like how they succinctly stated these qualities. Catherine Riggs was the best storyteller. Helen Korb was always encouraging. With Roxana Koenig, we could never do anything wrong. She always said, let's try again. Don't you love the attitude those folks had and the encouraging nature in which they passed the treasure of the faith along to the next generation? It sounds like it was just a warm, loving, caring, giving, serving, teaching culture in the past that was eager to pass the faith along. Well, these are only some of the names, friends. There are so many more that are unnamed